Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:06 as we just charge through the 4-hour extravaganza known as O'Connor and Company, America's morning show. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock, and coming up at 6:05, John Schweppe. Oh, no, that's right now. Right now, we're going to talk to John Schweppe, American Principles Project. Then at 6:35, former Virginia State Senator Amanda Chase. 7:05, Mark Chenoweth from New Civil Liberties Alliance. At 7:35, Representative Andy Harris of Maryland. 8:05, Ron Vitiello, candidate for Senate in Virginia. And then at 8:35, Byron York, Washington Examiner. Today's the Michigan primary. Polls open in 1 hour in the Great Lakes State, the Wolverine State. If you seek a beautiful peninsula, look about you. It's Michigan.
There we go.
Guess where I'm from originally.
I know.
Yeah. Joining us right now is John Schweppe, Director of Policy, the aforementioned John Schweppe. Could we say his name more often in the last 90 seconds? Director of Policy at the American Principles Project. Talk about a Supreme Court case now on social media and state regulations. Thanks for joining us, John.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
So the state of Florida and the state of Texas both basically said social media companies can no longer censor and ban free speech or persons from their platforms based on so-called misinformation, disinformation, or political opinions. And that's what's being challenged here at the Supreme Court level?
Yes, and it was a really interesting oral argument, in part because, while there was some skepticism of the constitutionality of those laws, NetChoice, which is the trade group that represents the big tech firms, they tried to make this larger argument. They made a facial argument that that content moderation, aka censorship, is First Amendment protected in every instance. And the court actually responded pretty, in a hostile way to that as well, which was really encouraging. Basically, there was one dialogue there where Paul Clement, who is representing NetChoice, was asked about Gmail and whether, under this theory, could Gmail go through Tucker Carlson's emails and delete or censor or whatever? And he basically left that open, as in, well, yeah, under our theory, maybe. And so this is the thing here. The idea that censorship, even by a private actor, can be speech is a pretty crazy thing, and I think that would have lasting consequences.
So the argument I guess they're making, if I could, somewhat devil's advocate, is, listen, we made this sandbox called YouTube. We created this sandbox called Facebook. We have a right to say who plays in our sandbox or not and what they can say. And if we think that they're violating the rules of our household, then we have a right to kick them out of our sandbox because it's ours. And that's not infringing their First Amendment rights. They can go either play in another sandbox or they can build their own sandbox to play in it. What's wrong with that argument?
Well, that is the argument. And if they commit to that, I think that has lasting consequences on some other things like Section 230. But, one thing that was interesting was the laws, the common carriage laws came up. And under common carriage laws, UPS can't discriminate against who they're delivering packages to or who they're taking packages from. And the argument that was made by NetChoice was essentially that, well, once you start censoring, then it becomes speech because then you're making an editorial judgment. And so Whitaker, the Florida SG, actually kind of asked, well, okay, so could UPS start, deciding, and then all of a sudden then they wouldn't be eligible for common carriage laws? And it's a really interesting concept. So, I think on this, obviously, there's a question here as to what we can require of the social media companies, but certainly a lot of conservatives would like to see at least that states could require a kind of common carriage non-discrimination system on viewpoint.
It's interesting, speaking of conservatives, Justice Kavanaugh said that he worries because the First Amendment prohibition on barring speech applies to government action, not action taken by private companies. And fair enough, that is true. But what we've seen in the last couple of years, especially with what happened at Twitter, is that many of these tech companies are now becoming sort of adjuncts of the government and doing the government's dirty work to sort of get around these restrictions. Do you think Kavanaugh is missing that? What can you shed light on him sort of saying, I just don't think that applies the way it used to.
I understand, where he's coming from on this. It's a very strict reading of the First Amendment. The problem here, obviously, is that, let's say that this case did go Net Choice's way, and then Missouri v. Biden goes our way, and it says, hey, no, you can't have government involvement here. Well, then we've just basically given the blueprint to the Soros people and all that. You just go through the private actors, and you can de facto censor in an effective way.
Yes.
And so that's the problem here, and obviously that's why groups like ours, American Principles Project, we've been very involved in fighting to try to require free speech from these platforms, and it's important because as we head into 2024, they're absolutely going to engage in mass censorship again.
We are speaking with John Schweppe. He is with American Principles Project, and it seems like there's two arguments here. The first one should be an easy slam dunk, which is we have evidence that the federal government, through the administration, through executive branch departments like the Department of Justice or Health and Human Services, they proactively engaged with these social media companies, directing or at the very least strongly suggesting that they delete information and censor people. That's direct government involvement, and that should be a no-brainer, not even a question. But, John, social media companies like YouTube and like Facebook and the old Twitter before Elon Musk took over and made it X, they were engaged in this voluntarily at the time, oftentimes because of pressure from either advocacy groups like Media Matters or from advertisers who didn't want their content associated with certain ideas. Where does that part of it shake down? Again, in other words, you create this platform. For instance, we're on the radio, which is a little more complicated because it does have some government oversight through the FCC. But it's at one point does a radio station have to feel compelled to accept ideas that they don't wish expressed because of how it aligns with their advertisers and such, right?
Right. Well, we've always advanced the idea, and this wasn't necessarily the only concept that was discussed yesterday, but we've always advanced the idea that market size does matter here. So, we've been talking about Google and their AI the last week or so and how crazy it is. But there's lots of different AIs out there. This looks like a space where there's a lot of competition. So, there's hope there. But when you're talking about search, that's not the case, right? Google is essentially has a total monopoly.
So
on
in
search.
other words, you reach a certain level and you're big enough. It's like you're too big to censor, if I may use that term.
No, I think you have to be a common carrier at a certain point because Google singularly can have such an impact on not just our election, but just on the way people perceive the world.
And is that why the argument? I saw some of the arguments were bringing up the telephone companies, AT&T and what have you, which also have some participation with the government as well. But they are individual companies and they are utilities. They're necessary for the functionality and communications of American people.
Yeah, and they operate well, and you have a situation there because the law is in place. You don't even have to worry. If there's a pressure campaign on Verizon to drop Laura Loomer like Uber did or whatever, they won't do it because of these laws. And so I think that's probably in the interest of us because we don't want to have our ability to travel or our ability to do this all taken away.
I get the sense that this is not going to be a straight 6-3 kind of thing. That this is one of those things where either a Gorsuch or a Kavanaugh or a Barrett or they could swing one way or the other, right? What's your take on it based on the arguments?
Well, I spoke to some people last night smarter than me on this, which is always...
Well, why didn't we get them on the show?
Yeah, we should probably get them on. But I think, one of the things that was discussed was this idea that this decision could be remanded. That basically they rule in a narrow way, but that they reject the facial challenge that Net Choice made, which could actually turn out, if you're looking to rein in these companies, as a good thing. And then the other thing I'll point out is they really committed to this argument that they're doing expression, that this is editorial control. That calls Section 230 into question. And we've been hearing this for 5-6 years. These guys say that they're neutral conduits, Well, now
they're using this idea that they're taking editorial control as some kind of defense. They can't have it both ways. That'll be interesting.
Correct.
To see how that shapes out. Really fascinating stuff. Obviously, we're keenly into that, considering that we utilize social media as well as old-fashioned social media, talk radio, to sort of communicate our ideas. So we'll keep watching it. John Schweppe, thank you. And you're the sick. Come on, you're the right guest. You're smarter than those other people. Come on, don't sell yourself short.
Thank you.
It's policy. It's the director of policy over at American Principles Project. It's 6:17. Let's get to
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Is foot pain holding you back? Visit the Good Feet store for a free personalized fitting and test walk.
On the next Vince Coglianese show, the big story that the media absolutely refuses to tell you about today, we've got it 3 o'clock here on WMAL.
All right, we alluded to this story earlier. This is the death of a 16-year-old girl in Oklahoma. Now, this is a young lady who was born and named as Dagny in high school, sometime in the last year, I believe. Dagny decided to identify as gender non-binary and took on the name Nex Benedict. This 16-year-old girl went into a school bathroom, had an altercation with 3 other girls, and the fight broke up within minutes.
Yes.
And then the girl was taken to the principal's office, taken home later in the day, went to the hospital for injuries. The police came, took a report, and then the next day she had trouble breathing. The mother panicked, called 911, and the girl ended up dying.
Yes.
And the latest report from the police department is that the girl did not die as a result of trauma, which suggests that the fight and her death are not directly related. Now, there could be an indirect relation. We'll get to that in a minute. But those are the facts that we've just given you.
That's right.
If you read mainstream newspapers or listened or watched mainstream television or radio, you would get a different story. You would hear that Nex Benedict was bullied and murdered.
Beaten to death
by high school kids because of her trans identity. And by the way, is a direct result, and I'm not kidding you, I have seen in the media all of these direct relationships made, a direct result to Oklahoma having a bathroom rule where only girls can go in girls' rooms and boys go in boys' rooms, as well as Chaya Raichek of Libs of TikTok, who a couple of years ago featured a video from TikTok with one of the administrators from the school district.
Yes.
The school district that was pushing a gender ideology on the students. And I've also seen it related right back to Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans. And I just want to reiterate, not only is there no evidence in any way whatsoever that this death of this 16-year-old girl, which is absolutely tragic that she died, however she died, that it is in any way related to transgender policy, related to conservatism, to Republicans. There's no evidence that her death is related to her gender identity.
Right.
None of that is there, but they are raising this person up as like a Matthew Shepard. Matthew Shepard is a young man who was beaten and killed in Wyoming 25 years ago. We were told at the time it was because he tried to pick up a guy in a bar. The guy was such a homophobe that he took Matthew Shepard and beat him and left him for dead. And he became this iconic image of gay bashing and anti-gay hate.
HBO movies.
Oh, plays, screenplay, foundations, laws after him.
Yes.
Turns out he was a meth dealer. He had $10,000 cash. He was killed because of the money and the meth, and one of the murder suspects actually used to have an affair with him.
Yeah.
He was such a homophobe that he used to have sex with Matthew Shepard.
Right.
But that lie is buried in history now, and this lie is being purported before our very eyes.
Yes, and you see headline after headline after headline saying that this Nex Dagny girl was killed because of her identity.
Yeah.
Her head was bashed in.
Literally zero evidence of that.
None. I mean, there's film of her at the hospital talking very clearly. Her mother actually uses her pronoun, a she pronoun. When she calls 911, she calls it she pronoun. And the student is sitting there and just not reacting.
Yeah.
This appears to not have anything to do with her identity.
This 16-year-old girl tells the police, however, there's body cam footage, tells the police officer that the fight started because they were making fun of how she dressed. That would have been a perfect opportunity to say because of my identity.
But she
because
didn't.
No, she didn't. And by the way, she was dressed like teenage girls dress, which is, baggy pants and a T-shirt, which, by the way.
Also, making fun of how you dress in school is kind of common.
Sadly.
Yeah.
She also confesses or admits that the fight started because they were laughing at her in the bathroom, so she took her water bottle and poured water on them, and that began the fight.
Yeah.
Listen to this report from NBC News.
Newly released school surveillance cameras show Benedict in the cafeteria with classmates, then walking into a bathroom where Benedict says a fight broke out.
They had said something like, "Why do they laugh like that?" And they were talking about us in front of us. And so I went up there and I poured water on them. Okay. And then all three of them came at me.
Shortly after, a faculty member rushes into the bathroom. Later, Benedict is seen walking to the principal's office and then out of the school, escorted by their mom. The next day, Nex's mom calling 911, telling dispatchers Nex is having trouble breathing. She later apologized on a GoFundMe page for not using Nex's desired pronoun.
Listen to that.
Can you imagine?
This grieving mother who gave birth to this girl,
who
fed
calls
her
911
diaper.
in a panic as her daughter is not breathing.
Right. And now she has to apologize to activists because she
used the wrong.
misused.
I mean, this is insane.
The original reporting from last week: non-binary student dies after girls beat her head across the floor in bathroom assault. Again, the police department in Owasso, Oklahoma, said that the death was not the result of injuries from the fight. We're waiting for the toxicology report. There is speculation that there was an OD. We're not going to delve into speculation. If it is an overdose of some kind, if she did commit suicide, it will be that will be. They'll say, well, she
hold.
She was no. Oh no.
Oh,
this is what happens.
say,
Trans
yes,
students kill themselves.
Yes, of course.
Because of the bullying. That she will. That then the icon will be created, and
this will be yet another reason why you must, you must
acquiesce,
give in to the transing of your children.
Take a knee to all of it.
Yes.
Otherwise, your daughter will be next Benedict.
Yes.
That's where we are.
Do you want a transition child or a dead child?
But now at least you have the facts of the case as you start seeing this reported, and as you see your radical left-wing friend on Facebook raising this up, you'll know the facts.
That's right.
625.
Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:37. Hey, thank you for being part of what we're doing here. We really enjoy what we do, but we can't do it without you. So thanks for tuning in here to 105.9 FM, WMAL, or wherever you're listening to us on the WMAL app worldwide. Coming up at 7:05, you're going to hear from Mark Chenoweth with New Civil Liberties Alliance, another case that we're looking at with regard to guns and bump stocks down in Texas and the Supreme Court. 7:35, Representative Andy Harris of Maryland. 8:05, Ron Vitiello running for the U.S. Senate for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And at 8:35, Byron York, Washington Examiner. That's a lot.
That is a lot.
And we're not even going to take a pause because we have Amanda Chase here, too. I'm Larry O'Connor. That's Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
Amanda Chase was a U.S. Senator for the Commonwealth down there in Richmond, and has not given up following laws and proposals brought on by her leftist friends and sometimes some misguided Republicans down in Richmond. Thanks for joining us, Amanda Chase.
Good morning, Larry and Julie. It is great to be with you.
So, what is on your radar here with regard to guns? It looks like it's funny, when the Democrats were running, they were like, I don't remember any of them saying, give us the majority, and we're going to infringe on the Second Amendment every chance we get. I mean, we knew they were going to do that, but that's not what they ran on. But it seems like that's all they're doing down there, that and abortion on demand up until the moment of birth.
Well, Larry, Julie, you're exactly right. And if you look at both House bills and Senate bills that are passing both chambers, by the way, you see over 50 bills that are coming after your guns, incrementally, one way or the other, whether it's an unattended motor vehicle, whether it's increasing the age requirement for a purchase. Capitol Square Hospital, they are chipping away at your rights one bill at a time. And, it really comes down to Governor Youngkin at this point. And I just encourage and implore people to reach out to Governor Youngkin now. He's He didn't fill out the VCDL survey or the NRA survey, but he has assured me that he supports the Second Amendment. And so now is the chance for the governor that we voted and elected to do what he said he was going to do and defend our Second Amendment rights.
Well, and let's just be clear. Reason Democrats have put all these laws in here is that they want this talking. They're trying to stop Glenn Youngkin's future political career. And they want to be able to have something that they put in an ad saying, as governor of Virginia, he vetoed dozens of common sense gun safety bills. So that's why they put all dozen of them in this one session.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's more than a dozen. We are talking about over 50 bills, and they're passing both bodies. And, I always go back. When I was a legislator, I looked at all the gun bills that came forward, and I had to remember, we not only have the U.S. Constitution that has the protection of the Second Amendment right there in our Constitution, but we also in our Virginia Constitution have Article 1, Section 13, saying that, we have the right, it's the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Yet it's very tricky and crafty what the Democrats have done. They have targeted, and they said, they're going after situations where, look at the boyfriend loophole. They're talking about, well, wouldn't you take away somebody's gun if, they're in a bad relationship and, this situation. What about children? We want to make sure that we keep guns away from children. So we want to lock your firearms up so that when there's an emergency, you can't actually get to it.
Right.
It's all about, what's so crazy and maddening is that we have an invasion at our border, and the Democrats are advocating for the criminals and the lawbreakers. Yeah. They're coming after law-abiding citizens. All of these bills, all 50-plus gun control bills, are targeting law-abiding citizens, in which they're, we shouldn't be infringing on law-abiding citizens. And if the criminals have, different types of guns or ways to, come after me, I want to be able to protect myself and my family. And, I'm not going to bring a knife to a gunfight, right?
Well,
that's what the Democrats are asking us to do.
It wasn't so long ago that not all Democrats were for all these gun control measures. Some could still be relied upon to recognize the right of Americans to defend themselves. But Virginia Democrat seems to have gone insane on everything from parenting to porn in schools to obviously gun control. Are they in lockstep, or do you see some Democrats voting against these bills? What sort of is the state of Democrats in Virginia on these issues?
Make no mistake, every Democrat is going to vote for gun control. We even have some Republicans voting for gun control, and I'm going to expose them. And I encourage people to get my newsletter. It's free. I mean, I'm asking for donations because I'm not employed anywhere right now. I'm doing this because I feel like I have to help save our country and our state.
Well, tell people how to get the newsletter then.
Go to chaseforsenate.com. It's my old website. And this is a sense of duty. I mean, somebody who is not running for office, somebody that has been in the General Assembly and knows how all this works.
Yeah.
And by the way, I do want to mention, you talking about U.S. Senate candidates. Did you know there's one U.S. Senate candidate who's not even a U.S. citizen, who all the candidates running are from Virginia except for one, and they're claiming that they're from another state, and you just wouldn't even believe it. So all this is going to come out in my newsletter. Go to Chase.
Hold on, Tim Kaine is not a U.S. citizen? That's remarkable.
No,
I thought
it's a Republican. That's
oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what.
It's not from Virginia. It's all going to come out.
All right. We'll keep an eye on that. Meanwhile, here's what's interesting to me. Not that the facts matter to Democrats and the gun grabbers, but, this big push over 24 anti-Second Amendment laws in Virginia. Right now, Virginia ranks 31st when it comes to gun violence in America. That puts them in the bottom third of all states. It's not like this is a giant crisis that's going on. In fact, gun-related homicides have stayed pretty much consistent for the last 15 years in Virginia. You look across the river in Maryland, where they've got many more restrictions on the Second Amendment, and boy, they're certainly beating Virginia out with their gun deaths right now. So, I mean, they're in the 14th highest rated in Maryland right now. So why this big demand right now? They're claiming that it has to do with the rise in gun violence. There is no real rise in gun violence. This is all political, and it's a power grab, Amanda Chase.
Well, you're exactly right. And if you look at Democrat-controlled states, you are seeing an increase in gun violence because they're taking away guns from the law-abiding citizens.
Right.
Criminals are never going to.
Criminals are the only ones that'll still have guns.
Yep.
That's what it looks like in Maryland right now. All right, we got to leave it there. Former State Senator Amanda Chase, who is giving out a free newsletter and otherwise still staying politically engaged. We appreciate you joining us.
Well, anytime. I love coming on your show. Thanks for having me.
It is 6:40. I don't know. You've got 3 young teenage boys, right? And I don't know where you stood on this whole push for later school start times.
God, I want them out of the house as early as possible. Are you kidding? What do you think I am?
Well, and the argument was when this finally got pushed through that it was, because of the circadian rhythms in children. And it's like, when I was that age, I took extra classes that only started early in the morning before the regular school day started, and I was motivated to do it, so I made it done. I guess I've always been waking up early when I'm motivated to do that, like we do on this show.
There is a softening of kids nowadays that I just,
Part of if they're motivated to do it, they'll do it. You can't explain to me how a kid can be a senior in high school and the circadian rhythms mean they have to start later, and then literally 3 months later, they can be enlisted in the Marine Corps and waking up at dark 30.
Grow up.
Right.
Grow up. Nobody cared about my circadian rhythm.
Well, now that because you let the camel's nose under the tent,
right,
Fairfax County is now opening the floodgates, and apparently they want to do the same thing with middle school students now.
I mean, look, and this is because teachers want to start later.
That's exactly what this is about.
That's right.
It's because teachers don't like waking up early. And
nobody likes waking up early. We could talk about that.
And parents always jump in and they say, "Oh, but it's true. My kid, it's so hard to get him to sleep." Really? Do they have an iPad or an iPhone in their bedroom when they're going to bed?
Have you tried yelling at them? Get up!
You lazy butt.
Honestly, I just talked about this yesterday with someone about how they're also doing away with homework.
Yep.
They're doing away with sort of a lot of what we grew up with. And again, it's softening of kids.
The softening of kids. Back when I was your age. Are we doing that thing?
Yes, we are.
It's 6:52.